Have you ever wondered what happens to those who disappear in Yosemite National Park? Not just the ones who slip and fall, but the ones who vanish without a trace, leaving behind nothing but eerie whispers in the wind. Ethan Reynolds never believed in the supernatural. He was a rational man, grounded in logic, until the day he stepped into the deep wilderness of Yosemite. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway, just him, his camera, and the vast, untouched beauty of nature. He wanted solitude, a break from the suffocating city life. But what he found was something that had been waiting for him all along. The first night, everything felt normal. He set up his tent near a quiet stream, the sound of rushing water lulling him into a sense of security. The stars above twinkled like watchful eyes, but there was nothing unusual. Yet, in the middle of the night, something woke him. A whisper, low, indistinct, but unmistakably human. He sat up, heart hammering. The fire had dimmed to embers, and the trees around him seemed darker, as if something had shifted in the forest. Then, he heard it again. A soft shuffle, like bare feet moving through the underbrush. He grabbed his flashlight and swept the beam around his campsite. Nothing. Only the trees, silent and unmoving. His rational mind told him it was probably an animal, but his instincts screamed otherwise. The next day, as he hiked deeper into the forest, he found something strange. A staircase. An old, wooden staircase, half buried under moss and thyme, leading up to nowhere. It stood there, unnatural in its solitude, as if it had been plucked from another time. Something about it unsettled him, but his curiosity won. He climbed, one step at a time, feeling the wood creak beneath him. The higher he went, the thicker the fog became, swirling around him like ghostly tendrils, and then, silence. The forest, which had been alive with the chirping of birds and rustling leaves, was now deathly still. Even the wind had ceased to exist. He turned back, only to find that the staircase was gone. The ground where it had stood was now covered in dense foliage, as if it had never been there at all. Panic set in. He retraced his steps, or at least he thought he did. But the trees looked different now, twisted and unfamiliar. Shadows moved where there shouldn't be any. And then, he saw them. Figures, pale, featureless, standing just beyond the fog. Watching. He ran. Branches clawed at his skin, roots seemed to shift under his feet, trying to trip him. His breath came in ragged gasps. The sun should have been setting, but the sky remained a dull, gray nothingness. It felt like time had abandoned this place. Then, a whisper, right behind his ear, "Stay." If you're still watching, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves a good horror story. Because what happens next will make your skin crawl. His legs burned, exhaustion weighing him down, but he couldn't stop. Not when the shadows were closing in. His compass spun wildly, refusing to point north. His GPS showed his location as unknown, and then, the footprints. Barefoot. Leading away from him, deeper into the mist. They weren't his. He followed, because what else could he do? The deeper he went, the more distorted the forest became. The trees bent at impossible angles. The ground felt wrong, as if he were walking on something that was breathing. He could hear it now, the low, rhythmic inhalation beneath his feet. Then the whispers turned into voices. Layers of them, overlapping, speaking in a language he didn't understand. Some laughed, others sobbed. A child's voice called his name. He spun around wildly, his flashlight flickering. The fog thickened until he could barely see his own hands. He began to see things: his childhood home, his mother's face, old friends he hadn't thought about in years. They whispered to him, coaxing him deeper. His grip on reality was slipping, memories blending with hallucinations. Was he losing his mind, or was the forest bending reality itself? His camera beeped, signaling a low battery. He looked down and saw the last photo he had taken, an image of himself staring back at him from the staircase. But in the reflection of his eyes, there were figures. Hollow-eyed. Waiting. That he stumbled backward, dropping the camera. It landed with a sickening crunch, its screen shattering. The whispers turned into screams. The forest was alive now, pulsating with a dark energy that sent his mind spiraling into panic. Then, he saw the staircase again. But this time, at the top, there were figures. Hollow-eyed, grinning, waiting, Ethan screamed, but no sound escaped his lips. He turned and ran, pushing through the fog, stumbling over unseen roots. His legs ached, his lungs burned, but the whispers followed. The figures moved without moving, their presence pressing against his mind, forcing him to slow. Then, the ground beneath him shifted. He fell, down into an abyss that hadn't been there before. The sensation was endless, the darkness consuming. The last thing he saw was their faces, grinning as they reached for him. Days later, hikers found his campsite. His tent was untouched, his belongings undisturbed. But Ethan Reynolds was never seen again. Only the forest knows what happened. And it never tells.